Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 145 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to upgrade geoprocessing in preparation for making crystals. Enjoy. We're getting pretty close for these crystal seedlings. We've got the cellulose paste, we've got the alien bacteria, glass is already in the LTN network, so really the last element of this is crystal dust. And from a logistics point of view, we're either going to have to transfer crystal dust here to be made into seeds, which have to be added to the fish water, or we make the seeds elsewhere and don't transport the dust, but then we have to transport the seeds. Because these other numbers are fairly small. You know, 5 cellulose paste, which is already right here, and the alien bacteria is 3. These are small numbers, but 15 is probably big enough for a train. So in that sense, logistically, we want to think of how can we move this by train. I think it makes sense to squeeze a train station in here somewhere, because we already have it set up to pull crystal dust off of this. I put those belts in there to remind me that that could be done. That's really where the crystal dust has to come from. Now this whole setup also makes use of crystal powder as well. Like, it needs crystal powder in order to make the grindstones, which are used to cut up the crystals, but doing so also produces crystal powder. So on the whole, it probably won't require any crystal powder, but it also does require crystal slurry. And this setup may or may not generate crystal slurry. It definitely won't generate it if we are using 100% of the crystals, because one option we have to get rid of the crystals is to grind them up into powder. But if we're not doing that, we're definitely going to need to send this slurry down. And slurry is what's being made right here. But instead of sending a train for slurry and a train for powder, which seems kind of annoying, probably should just do the powder by itself. And then if we also send sulfuric acid, we can make slurry. I kind of don't like the idea of sending slurry, because if there is an excess of dust or powder up there, it's just going to be sent back down here to get processed. So I want to try to avoid having a loop like that if possible. And sending up acid is going to be fairly easy. We've got this little space here. It's kind of funny how this setup is in here. It might actually make sense to move it, depending on how many train stations we want to put in here. But this is ending up being a good place for train stations, where we can just have another train come out here. And I think we've got some, sulfuric acid here, so we can just bring the acid down here, put it in a train, and send it up there. But while we're thinking about this area right here, we might want to consider retrofitting it, because when we go into ore refining 2 here, we're going to need crystal catalysts in order to add to chunks to get our direct resources. And we're not making that yet because we don't have a use for it, but an emptiness in the line was set here specifically for that task. So we might as well retrofit this for that as well. In order to make the catalyst, you have to make crystal seedling, and the seedling is its own filtration setup, basically the same as everything else, where you add water to crystal slurry to get crystal seedling. Whereas the previous way, we were adding mineralized water to turn it into mineral sludge. So there'll be a little bit of logic here to make sure it works right, but let's kind of do the math here, where our factory is producing basically 6 red belts of chunks, and you need 1 crystal catalyst for every 4 ores. So that's 1.5 belts, or 45 a second, which is basically what we're doing here, where we have these 2 belts. And one thing that's a little annoying is that I didn't leave a spot in these belts for those catalysts. I mean, it could definitely just go a little higher, but some of these belts are in the way, so it won't necessarily be straight. So we might have to move some of that around, but we have an idea of numbers. So crystal catalyst, 45. And the crystallizer setup is very similar. Could probably put them right next to each other, but then the crystal seedling comes out of 22.5 filtration units, which needs some coal filters, and it needs its purified water. And then we have to remember to process the purified water in full, and then the sulfuric wastewater in full. So we'll need 2.3 of those. And that's basically the setup. I kind of want to retrofit the way this setup works. Because right now it's coming down and then dumping all of this into mineral sludge. But this is actually the final output if these crystals have no better place to go. So it actually makes sense that the next set of machines will be the ones making the catalysts. And then from there, the liquid will be pushed to the side somewhere else. Because catalyst is something that we need on demand, it's not a dump. It means we won't have to have any kind of logic or control, that it can just run all of the time. When we have it set up this way, we'd have to have some kind of logic turning the inserters on and off. Should be a little annoying. Okay, we've got an idea for a setup. For now, I'll just kind of pick up the whole thing, just as a reminder of what it used to be. And basically, we'll just pick up everything. Of purified water we were trying to save. Well, we will have to see if we can save it, but we'll leave it there for now. Okay. That's been successfully removed. So we need 22.5 filtration units, and we want to try to place it in such a way where it doesn't interfere with any of this stuff here. Well, this is pretty dense. So it would be something like this. So would it fit? Oh yeah. Let's copy the design into a blueprint and then figure out what to do with it. So that, but without these machines at the bottom. Let's see if the recipe on the filtration unit changes. Doesn't look like it. Purified water in, sulfuric water out. So all of these should basically line up. Yeah, it'll probably be something like this. So some of this is in the way. Just have to pick it up and move it over. Yes, like right here. That's the inputs delivered. And the outputs will probably want to be up here somewhere. It'll basically be the exact same size as this. Although there isn't a whole lot of space up here for that to happen. But it'll probably be up as opposed to down, since that's where the resources need to go. And we'll connect it later when we've got the new setup done. See, I notice there's some unnecessary wire in here. So now we need to handle the waters. Not a lot of space in here. Although they might actually just slice right in here if all of these poles are moved out of the way. But I think it might be a little easier just to move it off to the side here, since everything's already getting a little crowded. So we've got some wastewater coming in there. And actually, I wonder if we can do the other 3 plants on the other side here, making the fresh water. Is this going to work, or are we going to need some more space between all these? Oh, it might work, actually. Well, that was a little more compact than I thought it was going to be. Maybe it can go down here. I mean, talk about cutting that close. I don't think it's going to work. Mainly just these acid pipes, but this is also kind of like a little pipe bus right here, so we don't really want to get too close to it. Well, and another thing we need is to do this processing as well. And actually, the setup is pretty much going to be identical to this. So, this is a nice place to put it. And I guess the belt can, like, come up through here, because there's a little space in there. So, we can kind of put it facing this direction. Sure, why not? Let's see, we'll need to do some belts in here. We got to start reconnecting all these things, because there's quite a few systems interconnected. Let's see, this will be the storage tank for the water. Now, since we don't need mineralized water for this anymore, we're going to need to get rid of all of the crushed stone. And all of this together is 48, so 2 red belts of crushed stone. Looks like that might actually end up being an additional belt. And I think we are kind of running into a problem where there's nowhere to put it. Although we might be able to free up some slots here, because we still haven't used this phosphorus ore sorting thing. And I'm getting to the point where I might decide to just uninstall all of the Mad Clown ore stuff. So I still really haven't used very much of it. And I already uninstalled some of the Mad Clown nuclear stuff, because it just seemed, again, like most of Mad Clown stuff, kind of crude and unbalanced in how it was set up. So for now, I think I'm okay removing this entirely. We'll leave the mods in place for now, in case I change my mind, but we don't need this belt here. Actually, I wonder if we can come straight down. Well, we have these two right here. Basically where the other belts were. So the coal goes in that way. Then there's kind of some space on the side here. I don't know. We've got a lot of tank we have to go over. But I think we can. Like right there. And then make sure these are set to crushed stone only. And then it can go alongside these other crushed stone belts. And hopefully go in there. We also needed to have the clarifiers in here as well. Let's put a tank here. And then an overflow valve on the other side to get rid of any extras. So yeah, this setup's a little messier than it was before, but it is what it is. Things are getting fairly cramped here now, and that's fine. This was built in the age of belts, and the factory is slowly but surely starting to transform into the age of trains. So eventually, this stuff will be decentralized, as it is starting to occur out here. But since this build is still just fine, there's no reason to rebuild it just to decentralize it. We'll continue using it as long as we can, and then when it makes sense, we will put everything on trains and have them scattered about like this. So now we have these coal filters, and we need 3 machines for this instead of 2, so we can't do anything super cute. See if we have enough to populate the system. Probably not, since we made the setup bigger. Looks like we mostly did it, but probably want a few more filters in there. Let's see, were there any other belts or pipes or stuff that got unhooked? Sometimes that can be hard to keep track of. And I would love to test this to see if it works, but I'm not so sure we're going to be able to do that. I mean, we could do some research or something to get this process started, but we're actually like almost full on every resource, or very close. So only a couple of these are going to run, and they're probably not going to run long because it's just silicon is this thing that's limiting everything. So even if we do some research, we're probably not going to be producing all that many resources. Oops, there's no output on this. That would help. Might help these belts to have a faster belt just right there. So we're not really going to be able to test this in full, and plus it'll only go at full speed if we're producing all of the geodes at once. So unfortunately this is a case of not much to see here, move along. We'll just find out later if it works properly. See, here's the output, which we can just come straight across and into here. Then we need to get these hooked up. There is an empty spot between them right here, which we can use. And how would this work? It looks like it'll fit without interfering with any other belts. And then we'll just have to turn them as appropriate up here. At least that'll be the crystal catalyst, all set up and ready to go. So now that we've retrofit that, it's time to take it a bit further and actually consider our new setup here, where, as discussed, it'd probably be better to deliver crystal dust to this location, and then it can produce the seeds as required, and it can produce the crystal slurry as required. Out of curiosity, let's see how much powder it would take to make this crystal slurry. It would take 90 total splinters. So this setup is designed to make 15 of each type. So even if we were grinding all of them, which we wouldn't, because this isn't a way to generate dust, it's to generate the splinters. So if we don't need any splinters, we won't be producing any. At most, we'd only make 45 per second, not 90. So right there, this says that although grinding the splinters will help in reducing the factory's requirement for crystal slurry for this process, it still needs crystal slurry. And that is most efficiently made from crystal dust. And instead of delivering slurry and dust, which is kind of annoying, since it's fairly easy to produce the slurry, it's just dust and sulfuric acid, it'd probably be better to just send this crystal dust down and also send some sulfuric acid on a different train, which can be used as appropriate to make this setup work. So we need to get crystal dust on a train. So we'll probably want a train station around here. But also we need to replace this setup that was turning all of those crystals into the mineral sludge just to dump it. However, a lot of this setup is no longer required because it's basically just repeating itself. So it's a lot going on, but really what we would need are these 10 filtration plants and the associated water processing. Because we're already making the slurry here. It'd probably be easier just to rebuild the whole thing. It's like I kind of want to put it there, but we have to consider where this train station is going to be. We've got this coming up here, which might be able to come up here into a loading station and then spin around. Since the train station is probably more sensitive to its location, let's get the train station built first and then figure out where to process into mineral sludge. We'll need a drone request for some fuel, but for now, we need to worry about how we're going to get all of those resources in there. Probably do some beltception here. Have some belts and undergrounds taking up the same space. And let's see here. I'd like to set this up to where the belts can just bypass this, but it might not work very well. But we might be able to set up some outputs for this. So bottom two are crystal dust, top two are the stone. So let's get that lined up. Starting to get pretty cramped in here. There we go. So we got 4 dust outputs. But we'll have these dust outputs only enable if dust is more than, let's say, 200. Otherwise, if it's not like this, it disables, and make sure that the priority goes towards making the catalyst. And this is another thing that we won't see operating because there'll be no resources for the train to pick up, so I'm not going to see much happening here. But we'll call this crystal dust load. And we'll need a request depot in here, requesting those rocket boosters. And the one. So the last thing for this is finding a new home for this part of the setup, but it will be much smaller. I do kind of want to try to reuse this, or at least see what we can do about reusing it. There's so much stuff to remove. Let's just find a place to plop it down. Then come in here and make another blueprint with the part I actually want to keep, which is very roughly this part. There we go. So where is this actually going to go? Well, it uses the same output as this fluid here. So anywhere that's below it would be pretty good. And we'll need to run a wire up here for some logic so it's not running all the time. And it needs to have the water purification systems in place. Although, maybe not. The reasoning being is that either this system will run or this one. Not both at the same time. I mean, they both might be operating in partial capacity, but they're both based on full capacity. So either one or the other will run, which means there are supplementary components, these water treatment plants, will support either setup, assuming they use roughly the same amount of resources. So it actually can go anywhere. It might even be able to use the same filters as well. So I imagine it doesn't use as many filters as the other setup. Nope. So yeah, it could all be hooked up to the same thing. Well, when I built this, I probably should have kept that in mind, but it's like, now I really want to put it right here, because technically it might fit. Well, okay. Let's see if we can take this setup and squish it down even more so it'll fit in there. Let's just build it. A little easier to visualize it when it's actually in place. We won't need this filter processing. And let's see, we can certainly really squish this in here if we do the typical old pipe stitching. We push that up there, which means none of this is necessary. And then this can go in either here or here. Let's do that way. And then they just need little zigzaggy pipes in here to get everything hooked up. And we'll worry about getting the sulfuric water in there when it's in place. And there's no space for lights. Luckily, it matters less these days than it did before. Well, it's been compacted even more. Hopefully, compacted enough. Oh man, it's so close. But unfortunately, there's also these pipes right here, which kinda need to be there. Well, we may not be able to put it down there, but is there somewhere else nearby we can do this? Actually, yes. We could potentially just put it in here. But we are going to have some belts of filters moving around. I'll try to squish this in here a little bit. And actually, we probably could just continue these belts up here. So the filters can come up through there. Then actually just kind of zip around down here. And then the used filters can come up through here, but we've got to get this all adjusted correctly. It was a weird inserter where it was picking up far and dropping close. Then they go back some zigzags later, and they're going back in. And it looks like this can actually just go straight across. But we do want to have a tank here with some logic. So actually, let's put it up there. And we need some logic. And actually, in that sense, we probably don't need that tank. We just need to have this pump right here. And this one control point. If there's nothing in the warehouse, they all go down to filling up catalysts. And then once catalysts have filled up, they'll back up to the warehouse. And then they'll start going to the train. However, if the train is full and starts backing up, then this warehouse will start filling. So since this is set to 200, although I'm worried that those numbers are a little too small. So if we loosen this up, this would hold 2,000, so that would hold 4,000. So if it's more than 1,000, these two turn on. And I would say if it's more than 2,000, this turns on. So crystal dust is more than 2,000. And actually, we don't even need that combinator at all. We can just go directly to the pump here. And finally, we still need to squeeze this in here somewhere. I mean, it does fit here. It's just we'll need to move these signals more appropriately. Well, that's good news. It's producing a tiny bit, so I guess it's working. We'll need to zigzag our way in there. Pretty sure that's the whole process. Looks like we need to make a whole bunch more filter frames though, but otherwise, I think it's set up. I'm not going to be able to test it for quite some time until the factory is running again, so we'll just have to remember to check this at some point to make sure that it's working. But I guess if it's not, we're going to be filling up on crystals. And then we're going to get some warning alarms. So I guess if it doesn't work, we'll find out eventually. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to finish fixing up our factory and being ready for crystals. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.